Most time when you come to Gettysburg, you get the stories about the battle tactics, the big names: Longstreet, Lee, Meade, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, and even some of the smaller names that make up a bigger picture, Jenny Wade. But I like to get into the other stories, the individual soldiers that fought out here. And today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about a man named Admiral Coon. And we're going to bring you his Gettysburg story, because he's one of the faces of Gettysburg. So out here in the trenches on Culp's Hill, just at the base, the 137th New York filed into line and stood fast to defend the earthworks that they were a part of, that they were into. And they had to defend it against North Carolinians, Marylanders, and Virginians. Some 2,000 soldiers were coming into their position to fight them. Part of that unit was a man named Admiral T. Coon. Now, Admiral T. Coon had a pretty rough life growing up. He lost his mother, his two brothers, and his own father a long time ago. And he was left with his two sisters. And as a young man, him and his sisters grew up together, taking care of each other. But they did all right. Admiral T. Coon would find himself into the American Civil War. In the summer of 1862, Admiral T. Coon would enlist and end up in the 137th New York. And he ends up in a training camp. And while he's there, he ends up taking a couple of photos with his family members. One such photograph was taken with his sister, or is it at least suspected that it's his sister. And you can see in the photo, the two of them are sitting together, and he's looking pretty stern in the photograph, and so is she. But then you take a look at the other photograph that he has. And in that photo, he's there with his, I think it's his nephew, Eddie. And his nephew is a small little boy. Can't be no more than maybe a year or 2 years old in that picture. And he's very fond of him. And you can tell by looking at the photograph, he's smiling and enjoying his time. That photograph was taken when he was in his initial camp with the Army. His life and Eddie's life would change forever. Admiral Coon's first battle would happen to be Chancellorsville just by happenstance in May of 1863. And during that battle, the 137th ended up sustaining 57 casualties, which is a pretty high rate of casualties for any unit. But they stood their ground and they did their job. Then you fast forward, and Coon is on his way to Gettysburg campaign, heading on his way up here. Well, that same month that he ends up fighting in Chancellorsville and getting his first real taste of what a terrible battle looks like, his nephew Eddie, the small boy, ends up passing away. So his feelings coming up here are probably pretty mixed. He's sad, to say the least. So I'm out here late in the evening, kind of as a tribute to the man, because he was out here late into the evening as well. Coons was out here in the fortifications that they tried to build real quickly out here at the base of this hill. And he's surrounded by soldiers coming up from the left, from the right to the front. And they're fighting all afternoon into the evening. And the fighting doesn't stop until about 10 p.m. that night. And then that's when they discover Coons. Coons has been shot through both of his knees. And while he's laying there waiting for help, probably screaming and pleading for help, he ends up taking a bullet to the abdomen. By the time the fight is over with, the very next day, Coons dies. Well, his story ends here at Gettysburg. There's no happy ending for him. But ironically, at about the same time, the same month, that Coons ends up being shot, wounded, and killed here at Gettysburg, his sister ends up having another son. And ironically, she names that son Admiral. Now, if you want to come out here to Gettysburg and see the place where that stuff happened, roughly, then come out here to the 137th marker here, and you can actually see some of the earthworks that are still out here in place. No doubt, Coons was out here on this field, right here in this very location where I'm at, and he was probably walking up and down. And during the time of the fight here at Culp's Hill, his unit of about 400 men, 450 men, were spread so thin that they really thought they were going to get overrun here. It's almost miraculous what they did here in the trench right behind me, right there. That lump of dirt. They clung to it for dear life. Unfortunately for Coons, it didn't work out for him, and he ends up dying here. But his ultimate sacrifice is what helped to save the Union and what helped to create this victory here at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Without individual stories like that, individual soldiers like that fighting to keep this country alive, we don't have the victory at Gettysburg, and we may not have the Union. So that's why I like to come out here and tell these stories and talk about these people on these battlefields here. Now, can you imagine all around me as the sun's going down? The cannons are going off. The muskets are lighting up the sky. Those dark woods behind me there are lighting and flashing like thunder and lightning. And all you have is a little bit of dirt between you and death. It's something else. Coons would be removed from the field after being buried on the battlefield, and then he'd be brought back to home and be buried at home. Well, not every story in Gettysburg is the same or created equal. It's because people are different and the things that they experience are different. But that's what makes this place so unique. Hope you enjoyed the video out here about Mr. Coons and the individual story of a soldier that fought here. Until next time, this is History with Waffles.